Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear. If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker, they're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truths from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 247. Today, I'm talking with my good buddy, Taylor Chamberlin, also known as the Urban Bowman. So stay tuned. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. I'm pretty pumped up because this is game week, if you will. This is the week that I finally get to get into the timber with a bow, climb into a tree. This weekend, it may or may not be a tree. We'll see. I've been watching the weather. It looks like it's going to be probably around 80 degrees, so not great, but we'll take it. And was checking out the wind. You know, things could change between now and then, just trying to figure out where I might go for the opener on Saturday. Really probably looking at more an evening hunt. I don't, as I mentioned previously, don't have real good tabs on any great shooters right now as far as that I would be able to make a move on like I did last year. So I'm probably going to just be doing a little doe patrol here early, slip into some areas that I aren't of any significant consequence when it comes to trying to kill bucks potentially. But as things kind of continue to play out, this past weekend, I was actually in a new area that I'd been scouting and did a camera pull that I checked out over the winter and hung some cameras over the spring that I've talked about, and did a camera pull this weekend, and super stoked on what was on camera. I won't necessarily let the cat out of the bag. My buddy Aaron Hepler was with me. We grabbed a bunch of camera cards, and we actually did a podcast after we got done kind of pulling cameras and kind of doing a pseudo scout at the same time. There's one area that we wanted to check out as we were pulling cameras. Ended up being a bust, but the inventory we had on camera more than made up for it. And so it's looking more and more like I'm going to be spending more of my October time or hunting bucks, if you will, in the new area, just based on the inventory that we have. But have a cool show for you guys today. We're going to go ahead and get jumped into that show. But before we do that, I just want to give you guys a heads up. I know, I guess it was a couple months ago now, I had Bill on from Spartan Forge. And if you're not familiar with Spartan Forge, you can head over to the website and check out what they have online. But they have an app that's coming out, and it should be coming out here in the next, I would say, couple weeks. I would say middle-ish of the month, maybe toward the end of the month-ish. I don't know exactly what the date is whenever it's going to launch, but it's going to be killer. I've had an opportunity to kind of take a sneak peek at it, and I've used what they have in terms of what's on the website. And it's super cool what they've kind of done. If you don't know Bill's background, I would go back to the episode I did with Bill and just kind of listen to, I guess, his layout of what the app is ultimately going to be able to do, or what it'll be able to deliver. Because right now, when you think about apps that are out there for hunting, for mapping and stuff like that, it's pretty basic. They do a decent job where you get your topography, you get property, some real-time weather type of stuff and things like that. But one of the things that I always kind of end up doing, like I did today, it's, when I get all these trail camera pictures, I'll go back and start looking at like historical weather dates and stuff like that, and kind of get a sense for, okay, well, whenever I get to go hunt this in October, what is my prevailing wind predominantly, right? And I start to kind of look at those types of things. And then, one of the things that's extremely helpful is, always trying to understand, predicted movement. Maybe you talk to some locals and start to understand, like, okay, so when does it really pop off? Like for me, I know locally here, man, it's definitely that Halloween timeframe, but I know in some areas that I've hunted other places where it's really more that middle-ish first week of November. Other places I've been, it's more the second week of November. And so when deer really start to move, and that's one thing Bill is doing with Spartan Forge, is kind of trying to bring all these things, he's bringing all these things into one app, to where you don't have to kind of go to different areas to find this information. So it's this predictive modeling, deer movement, being able to kind of understand when deer are going to increase their movement in particular areas, and what other data points, weather, et cetera, are connected to that. And it's not just based on a single guy's understanding or theory on how deer move, from a farm in Iowa or Wisconsin or whatever the case is. This is actually based on real GPS collar data. Bill's background is actually in artificial intelligence with the military, where he was putting together packages to go kill bad guys. And so he's basically taking that same kind of learning and that same understanding of artificial intelligence and creating some modeling around deer prediction and movement overall. And that's really kind of what the, I don't want to say the basis of the app is, because you're going to get all the stuff you get with any of the other app, map companies or map, apps that are out there. But the thing that you're going to get that is, going to be, I guess, a cut above, is going to be that predictive, movement, or that predictive modeling of deer movement. The historical weather data is going to be kind of at your fingertips. The mapping, the features that are on there, like when you look at what's out there now, truth be told, what you will find on Google Earth a lot of times is more accurate in my personal opinion, just in what I've, some of the places I look at. And you don't really get a good sense of what things look like. It's kind of blurry a little bit. The imaging on the sample that I had seen is killer and is a cut above. So you're going to want to check out Spartan Forge when it comes out. Make sure you head over to the website just to kind of get a taste, if you haven't yet, for what Bill's going to have going on. But the app is going to be killer. I'm looking forward to it coming out. And if you guys are interested in kind of being able to have like a one-stop shop for all your deer hunting information, it's definitely worth checking out. You can go over to spartanforge.ai right now and check out just the desktop version of it. But the app is going to blow that out of the water. So be on the lookout for that. I'll make sure to mention it, and I'll post it on my Instagram profile when it finally drops. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Super cool show for you guys today. My buddy Taylor Chamberlin, the urban bowman. This dude is a crazy whitetail hunter. He hunts like 200 plus days out of the year. He's in D.C. Just a super cool dude. Been saddle hunting for forever. We get into a little bit of saddle hunting talk. We get into talking, urban hunting. We get into talking a little bit about gear, about hunting efficiency, and just being as efficient as possible, which is kind of appropriate right now, because usually the first hunt of the year for me every year is an unmitigated disaster. I'll forget something or something like that. Something will go wrong. And so we talk a little bit about that as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand, a deer hunting podcast. And today I have a buddy of mine that it's been way too long since the last time I had him on. He is the urban freak, if you will. I'm giving you a new nickname, man. Not just the urban bowman, man, but I'm like the urban freak. I'm talking.
My wife calls me the urban freak, so that works really well.
Right, nice. For a multitude of other reasons, I'm referring to the deer hunting.
Yeah, she calls me a lot of names, not many. My actual God-given name. Yeah.
Right. But I'm talking the dulcet tones you hear on the other line is my buddy Taylor Chamberlin. How you doing, brother?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much for having me on. We were talking before you hit record here. It's been 2 years.
It's been way too long. Way too long. I was looking at the Skype thing, because it always tells you the last time you spoke was. Oh, and you and I have talked otherwise, like texting and on the phone and stuff like that. But last time you've been on the podcast, it was like 2 years. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, man. It's like, it doesn't seem like it's been that long. But you know what they say, man, when you get older, time tends to fly by, and I think we were both in that bracket, if you will.
100%. Yeah, they say the days are long, but the years are short, and I am 100% in that category. We were actually, we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and it's like with little kids and just stuff that comes up. It's insane.
It is.
I was talking to a buddy of mine. I have two little girls, 3 and 1, and I was complaining to a buddy of mine. I was like, I don't realize, or I don't know, like, what I did with my free time before children. Like, you don't realize how much time you have to yourself, and then like you get married, and then you have some kids, and then it is game on.
Oh yeah,
no more free.
Yeah, it's full on game on, and you start kind of carving out like 5 minutes here. I mean, you're in that like stage of like constant care too, which is just like it's like boot camp of adult life.
I'm changing diapers. I'm changing my own diaper. I'm trying to get out in the woods as much as possible. And now, granted, like, we're going to play the world's smallest violin for me for a second here, because I still hunt 200 plus days a year. So it's not like,
yeah.
I'm not like, tied down in the house here. There's no shortage of hunting opportunities that I get to have, but it's not like it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, the folks out there listening, I mean, there's plenty of folks and dudes that are listening to this podcast that, have young kids and stuff like that, I'm sure. So they can, probably are all in the same boat to a degree. But I just remember whenever my daughter was that age, and you got it times two, like within 2 years of each other. Like that's crazy talk. Mine's 12, going to be 13 this year. So I'm slowly but surely kind of getting out of I'm way beyond like the constant care. Now I'm just the dumbest person that lives in the house. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I feel like it's all about perspective though. Right. Yeah. And so I have triplet brothers. And so I feel like I constantly find myself like a couple times a week, just questioning how my parents survived raising 4 boys, like 4 wild boys. And we're only 3.5. Yeah. Fist fights. I mean, we got really good at repairing drywall at a very early age in our house. But I mean, like, just having one kid at a time is difficult. And I can't imagine having a doctor be like, you're going to have 3 at the same time.
I'd be like, come again? Como se llama? Like,
yeah. Come and say no. Come and say pick one.
Yeah. Like, can we just put the other 2 back?
Yeah. What's the going rate for a baby?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm sure I could get more than like a black market liver. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Cause there's one growing in there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a pursuit for the price of one. That you got your sale.
You got a kid and a liver. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to go. But I mean, I think that's a good starting point, man. Like, given that you have, all the, parental responsibilities, shall we say, right? And you hunt a crazy amount. For those that don't know Taylor, or don't know his story, and we've talked about it in the last podcast. I would go back and listen to that one to kind of get the full depth and breadth of it. But Taylor hunts 200 plus days a year, lives outside of D.C. It's in an urban area, to where it's not only is he hunting because he loves it, but it's also part of kind of helping mitigate some of the issues with deer management and population control in and around, the suburbs and urban area of DC, which is how and why he's able to hunt kind of year round. But with that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. Sorry to cut you off, but I literally hunt year round. And the reason for that is because we have a major overpopulation of white-tailed deer. And, we dove deep into that in the last podcast we did. But if for anybody who hasn't heard that, I mean, the Cliff Notes version is that for where there should be a carrying capacity of 10 to 12 deer per square mile, they can't calculate how many deer there are in my area. Their best guess is 400 to 425 deer per square mile.
Yeah, which is just insane.
It's insane. You can go in the woods and you can crouch down to like 4 feet. Well, some people could stand up to 4 feet. You can get to about 4 feet, and you can see as far as your eye will let you, even this time of year, because the vegetation is just gone. And that's because the deer are so overpopulated, they're just crushing everything.
Yeah.
So the state allows a handful of people to hunt year round. Fortunately, I'm one of those people. Obviously that's in certain areas. There's a bunch of stipulation around that. We've talked about that in depth. So if anybody's interested, check it out. But it's crazy. And so it goes from a passion to an obsession, and you have to make sure that you don't stop loving what you're doing, because it's pretty easy to turn it into work and then kind of resent that you get to do something that's so cool or such a privilege to have. And you have to, I often find myself like joking with my buddy Billy, just always saying like, hey man, like guys would just die to have the opportunity that we have. And like, it sucks to hunt in July and August when it's 110 degrees out in like the DC swampy heat. But at the same time, like we get to hunt year round. That's pretty freaking sweet, man. Like I get to put carbon in the air all year long. And like, it sucks to drag deer and have the cops called on you and deal with all the stuff that you have to deal with when you're hunting in the suburbs, but we get to hunt year round. So like, it's pretty cool. And you just have to keep the right mindset and perspective when you're thinking through all that.
Yeah. So the one thing you mentioned, and I want to touch on it, is just, not turning it into a job or not losing like the passion for it because you do it so often or whatever. And like, to me, like it's burnout, right? Like how do you keep from getting burnout? Because I know just for me, and it might be different like when you're in season or maybe you're on a destination hunt or whatever. But if I go out for, say, I don't know, let's just say 2 weeks, right? And I grind for like 14 to 16 days straight. Man, after that 16th day, I'm good. I literally come home and I'm like, I need like a good 3 to 5 days of sleeping in my own bed, getting up at a normal hour and just kind of recalibrate to kind of reset. How do you keep from getting burnt out whenever you're just kind of, when you don't have that how do I say this? When you don't have that vision of an off season to kind of just like know that you're going to pull back and be able to kind of fully like recharge, reassess, and get ready for the next.
Yeah. When you have a finish line there that you're like working towards, it's easier to like, give it that extra push until the finish line. Right. Cause you can think in your like, oh, I got 12 days left in the season. Like I'm going to hammer them out, and that's what pushes you through. For me, I am a diehard whitetail hunter first and foremost. And so, I love being in the woods, and I love the chess game of being in the woods. I love trying to figure out where deer are going to be, why they're going to be there, and then go there and like see how my predictions worked or see if I was right or wrong. And I think a lot of that comes from, I taught myself how to hunt. I didn't learn how to hunt from anybody. And there was a lot of drive and desire there, and just to figure it out and then to be successful and then to shoot, 5 deer and then shoot 10 deer or whatever. And, not that, the quantity of deer that you shoot has anything to do with the level of skill that you have. But I just kept pushing myself. And now I'm at the point where it's kind of twofold, right? I am always striving to be a more efficient hunter. Whereas like until I'm at the point where every single time I go out, I'm harvesting a deer, there's something I can do better. I can access a property better. I can hunt a tree better. I can be quieter. I can be, play the wind better. I can play the thermals better. There are all these different things. And I'm trying to learn the deer. Like, why are they coming out where they are? How are they using topography? How are they affected by all these weird things in the suburbs of dogs and stoners and homeless people and everything that they deal with? And then also, I get to shoot a lot of deer, right? So I think that if I was in a spot where I only had one tag, like that would be brutal. But when you get to dump the string every couple nights, that doesn't suck either. So like,
right.
So I think the like the combination of all of that prevents you from burning out. But with all that being said, I still get to the point where like, in February when it is 10 degrees outside or 0 and there's a foot of snow on the ground and my alarm goes off at 4:15, like I'm not bouncing up all happy to like get out of bed. Right? Like I need a little bit of your coffee there, or sometimes a couple cups to get my ass out of bed and like get moving, because it does sometimes just feel like repetition. And I really have to like stay disciplined in going to the tree, not just a tree.
Well, that's a good point, man. Like,
right,
because that mental like toughness of that discipline aspect, because it'd be real easy just to be like, I'm gonna slip into whatever the easiest one is today.
Absolutely. And you have to. I mean, I got to a point a couple years ago where I took down every single preset tree that I had because I was getting lazy. With the exception of properties where there was only one tree to hunt from.
Right.
But I either was going to prep all of them or none of them, because I found myself getting lazy and then going to the tree that was easier to climb as opposed to the right tree I needed to be in. And there were too many times that, I wanted to shoot or walking by the tree that I would have been in if I hadn't have been lazy and actually had climbed the sucker and hunted it. So I just said, F it. Like, I'm going to hang and bang every hunt. And when you're doing that 200 times, 225 times, like that's a lot of hanging. And there was also a lot of banging going on too. So, I mean, it proved itself to be correct. And so, now if I do prep a tree, I make sure that there are plenty of options. But the other thing that I learned in doing that is, just because you have one tree that you're hunting, the deer are not dumb. They're picking up on what's going on. And even if you don't see any deer on that hunt, when they come in there that night at 2:00 in the morning or, 4:00, whenever they come through there, they're figuring out what's going on too. They're smelling the ground scent. They're trying to figure out like, okay, like a two-legger was here. Why is there scent stop at this tree? Or why is there so much scent here? And when you shoot enough deer from that single tree, they'll avoid that spot. Right. And so what I found was that, I have to work so hard to get access to these properties, and they're only a quarter acre or half acre, that if I'm pushing deer off because I'm shooting too many of them, I'm going to burn out a property without solving the problem of the deer on that property. Right. And so, and then I just have to start from ground zero all over again and go to the next property. And it's not as easy as just knocking on the door and they're like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. Right. And so even if you move to the tree that you could touch from the tree that you're hunting in, or move to the tree that's 5 feet away or 10 feet away, I'm shooting the deer in the same spot, but they're not figuring out exactly where the danger is coming from. Right. And it doesn't alter that area until you've killed that whole group of does.
Right. And I think it's important too, that, just in talking, when you said you tore down all the like the presets and stuff like that, I remember when I made a conscious decision to not hunt any presets ever anymore. Right. Like to where I was like, I'm never going to hang, your instance is a little bit different. You've literally got like 1,000 trees in your area that you could potentially hunt on all the different properties. Right. So it makes sense to have either some of them kind of pre-manicured or whatever the case is. Right. Little different. But similar principle where I was like, I'm tearing everything down because I want to have to go in and assess and make a decision. And to me, it was just that small little thing made the biggest difference in just being more finely tuned into like the acute little, bits of sign and nuances that you would kind of see as you're on your way into an area you might hunt. Right. And that to me, like, that's really smart. Just, in that sense of just pulling it down, because it makes you be more aware. And then, man, your setup system has to be slick as shit as many times as you do it. You know what I mean? Like to where your ability to get in and out of a tree, quiet, undetected, like doing it 200 times a year, man, it has no other option to be other than to be next level, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, like for anybody listening that doesn't, follow my stuff, like I am super anal, like to a fault. Right. And so I mean, you know, as my wife would tell you, I'm like super OCD, and it irritates me to no end to not be as efficient as possible. Which I think is part of the reason that I'm like such an anal deer hunter, is because it's unperfectible, right? Like, and I'm a big golfer too, and like golf is unperfectible, and so that like always keeps me very interested in like trying to continually get better. And so with my gear, it's like, I mean, for years and still now, if there's a tiny little thing that I can fix and make better, like I'm diving in, I'm figuring out how to do it, I'm changing stuff. I'm constantly tweaking things, like just looking for perfection.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like my full, like my truck setup, I mean, everything, even when you get down to like the tote in the back of my truck and like how it's layered, how my gear's layered, like down here in my man cave, like it's kind of embarrassingly bad when you start looking at like the level of type A, personality that's gone into it. But I mean, and it's funny because a couple of my buddies that are like really good friends that I hunt with, from college, like they might hunt half a dozen times a year, or maybe when we go to like our farm in Ohio, that's like the one time that they get to hunt that year.
Right.
And so it drives me insane when they're at the truck and they're like grabbing this and they're like, oh, I forgot that. And I'm like, Jesus, man, like figure out a system, like get your shit together and like figure it out, and it's just how my brain works. And obviously they're like, dude, this is hunting, this is fun. And I'm like, yeah, but it's more fun if you can like grab your stuff and like,
if you don't take an hour at the truck, I mean? Yeah.
Because I calculated 7 minutes for your drop off, not 14, right? And like I have a 32-minute walk, and like I have a certain time that I want to be at the base of the tree.
I'm the same way, man. Like I'm probably not to the level you are, but I have a system. Everything is, to your point, my tote's layered. When it gets into disarray, like whenever I'm on a trip and it's like you're living out of like last year I was in Missouri and Ohio and living out of that trailer that I built, and it's just like it's a small space. It's inevitably going to start to get cluttered. You got 2 to 3 guys in this small tiny spot. Everyone's trying to have their little place to kind of keep stuff in. Like by like the middle of the first week, I'm like ready to freak out because I'm like looking through my tote and I'm like, I know that thing is in here. Why isn't this organized?
Yep.
I can imagine your buddies come back like at lunch to hunt, and it's like Taylor dipped out of the woods, came back and organized all their totes for them.
What's funny is, I don't know if this happens for you, but like when I do go on a hunt where I break my like standard routine, I start forgetting stuff. Like because there's stuff that I take for granted where I'm like, okay, like, my saddle always goes here. And then when I'm in that little space where there's like crap everywhere, and all of a sudden I'm like, where's my saddle? Where's my release? It's like, because you get so used to that routine and that rhythm of knowing where everything is that when you break it, you don't think to look for it. Like I went on a hunt with a couple buddies a couple years ago, and my camera guy, a guy by the name of Taylor Coleman, he somehow took my platform, and then I took his platform, and we had all this camera gear, and it was just like crap everywhere. And so the next morning we get to the base of the tree and I have my stuff, and he's like, hey, do you have my platform from last night? I was like, no. He's like, what do you mean you took it? And I was like, yeah, but like I wasn't bringing it out here this morning. We didn't talk about that.
Right.
So it was like, we like climbed the tree and we like shared this platform together and hung a couple extra sticks on the side. And it was a full day rut hunt, like in Missouri. We were like 2 miles deep in public. And I was like, we're not going back. Like,
we're gonna make do.
I have my platform.
Looks like you're shit out of luck.
Yeah. He, fortunately we shot a deer like pretty early into that hunt. So he didn't have to. He's a good buddy. He didn't give me any shit, but most people should have and would have. But it was like, dude, like I have my system. Like I don't know how our wires got crossed when we're packing like 90 pounds of your camera gear out here, but
exactly. I'm the same way. Everything comes out of the tote actually in like a certain order for me to get dressed. to being like the first layer I want to put on. Like I know how it's supposed to happen. I'm the same way as you, where it's like I'm down to like the minute that I want to be like walking, or it's even more specific for me. I get even more anal about it when I'm boating when I have water access, just because I try to leave myself a little bit of a variation of time, because is the wind going to be bad? Is it going to slow me down, or am I going to like almost dump the kayak, or like, just anything stupid that could happen. So I'm always trying to give myself a little bit of extra time to make sure I can get to the tree quietly, don't have to rush. It's that old saying of like, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right?
Absolutely.
I try to operate under that mantra.
Well, yeah. And the other thing is, like, if I get to the tree and my time estimates have been wrong and I'm way early, I can put my head down and just hang out until it gets light.
Yeah.
Or, I like to be in the tree like a solid 45 minutes before first light. Right. Yep. So that's up, clipped in. So, what I do is I have this like little routine in my head where I do the same thing that you do. So I'll look at when first light is, take 45 minutes off that. And I think, okay, that's up here. I need to get up there. I need to walk there. And I'm like taking time off, and I'm at the truck. I'm getting dressed. I got all my stuff. And then I build like a 10-minute buffer in for just,
stupid
in case
shit.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Because it inevitably is going to, right? It's like, it's just the way it is, right? Like I can't think of one time whenever I've walked into the timber that it went like where like everything timed out just right, and especially at the beginning of the season. It's like usually like my first hunt or second hunt, like first 2 hunts of the year, I typically will go somewhere. Hopefully they're bad weather days where I'll go somewhere where I know it's like I'm going to be a mess. Like the first two, like, you know what I mean? Like
you gotta knock the rust off, though.
Yeah. I mean, I climb in my backyard and I kind of practice and do all that stuff, but it's not the same as kind of like, all right, I got all my stuff, I'm going to hunt today.
Right. Well, and just the walking into the woods, the fact that, stuff happens, I forgot my water bottle, or, whatever it is, like you just need to buffer in that time. But then I start competing against myself.
Oh yeah.
Where I'm supposed to be up there at 5:43. Like I'm going to beat it. And then, but at the same time, going slow and being quiet and methodical is way more important than the speed of it. Right. So like, even when I am racing myself, I'm also super anal about just being really, really, really quiet. I don't think people realize how important the sound that you make on your access and your exit, like how important that is to deer hunting in general, but really mature animal hunting, because I'm trying to kill mature does and bucks, right? And it's so important to just be really quiet. And that's why I think it's funny where, a lot of people that reach out to me on the saddle hunting stuff, they're like, well, how fast can you climb the tree?
Who cares?
Like, what's it matter, right? Like I can climb the tree silently. And I weigh 250 pounds, right? So like the fact that I'm a 250 pound squirrel and I can get up a tree without making any noise in any tree is way more important to me than like clunking around like a one-man band trying to go up the tree, just making a ton of noise, right?
Yeah. That's always the two questions that I always kind of, I won't say that, I mean, look, if people have questions about it, I want them to ask, because I want them to get as familiar as they possibly can with, saddle hunting, mobile hunting, like whatever it is, right? So it's like there aren't any bad questions necessarily, but the two that I think aren't maybe as relevant, and I think as people get into it and start to understand more, they realize it becomes less relevant. One is how quickly can you climb, right? Like that's one of the big ones, and the other one is well, how high can you climb, right? Because that's the other one I get a lot too, because it's like I'll either be one sticking or two sticking with 2/8, and that's really all I ever use. And they're like, well, how? Because I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'9", so 2 sticks and a 5-step 8er. It's like, and setting my platform, I'm around like 16 foot, and that's about my max I can get with my, taking that limited gear in. And they'll be like, well, don't you want to get to 20 feet? And I'm like, for what? Is there like some magic like thing that's going to happen when I get to 20 feet? It's like, I hunt at first cover, essentially, is what I do, especially in like October when I have some cover. It's like there's been plenty of hunts when I've hunted like 8 foot off the ground because that was where my cover was at. And it's like, it just, people need to get out of their head. Like, and I get it. High pressured states. Like I know John Eberhart preaches 30 foot up because Michigan deer will pick you off and stuff like that. I get it. There are some places where certainly, but if you climb to cover, like you're going to be good, and if that covers at 8 foot, then it's at 8 foot.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of people, one, they're just so used to hunting from a stand. A lot of people hunt with a climber around, East Coast.
Yeah.
Or maybe the lock on, but they're so used to being in something that's like sticking out off the front of the tree where
it also has predetermined distance as well, right?
Correct.
It's like you have sections, right? So
correct. And so they just think like, oh, my 3 lone wolf sticks get me to 12 feet and I need to be at 15 plus because whatever. They're these like arbitrary numbers. And to your point, like, I mean, dude, I've killed plenty of deer at 8 feet off the ground. I've killed plenty of deer 30 feet off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in between. The deer, the height that I really prefer to hunt at is having my feet right around like 18 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's cover. And I hunt at first cover regardless because I'd rather be in cover hiding than up above it. Tell my buddies I climbed to 30 feet. Because as you get higher, that shot angle gets so...
I was just going to say the same thing. There's a whole bunch of things that are a benefit to hunting a little bit lower. Yeah, exactly.
Because when you start looking at that shot angle coming in at like a 45, 50 degree angle, that nothing good's happening there. You're coming in real high, you're exiting low, you have a real high probability of like single lung hits or marginal shots. You're increasing the potential for bone and contact in it. There's just really nothing positive that comes out of that. Now, like, I guess the opposite argument of that would be like, well, I got a shot at an animal that I might not have gotten if I'd been hunting 12 feet off the ground. Well, like maybe, but the other thing that's great about saddle hunting is you're not walking through the woods, hunting for a telephone pole, right? Like the perfect basketball sized tree. I've been in trees, and again, like I'm 6'3", I weigh 250 pounds. I've been in trees the size of my calf that are, we're talking like 4 inches in diameter. And I've been up in them going like, this is going to snap. And when somebody finds me at the bottom, they're literally going to look at the broken toothpick and they're going to look up and be like, can you believe that idiot thought that would hold him? And like, yeah, you get a pucker factor of a solid 10 when the wind's blowing, but it's the right tree to be in. And like, that's one of the cool things about saddle hunting is I could climb the wall behind me, or I could climb my calf tree, or anything in between and be deadly in it. And I think that's really important both in mobile hunting, where you're going into a certain spot that you've predetermined is the spot you need to be in. And it's also important where I'm hunting here in the suburbs, because there might be 2 trees on a 1/4 acre property. And if they're both
gnarly,
40 inches in diameter, like I can still climb up and hunt them.
Yeah.
And so, and with saddle hunting, with the height question, people don't realize like how well you can hide yourself on a saddle or in a saddle, like on a tree. And I see a lot of these guys that are hunting and they're like extremely reclined and their shape is hanging off the tree funky. And then they're like, man, I got busted. And like, man, like I'm like pretty vertical with the tree. I'm still kicked back. I'm super comfortable. That's another question I get all the time is like, how is that comfortable?
I get the same thing. Yeah.
But, and we can go into that as well. But like, I mean, you don't have to be super high off the ground to have that angle that you're at be very effective. You basically are off like an angle, like a tree branch. I mean, I've had deer, like I've been playing on my phone, completely oblivious to what's going on around me, had a doe see me playing on my phone, moving around, and I've still killed that deer because they just don't know what you are when you're at this like tree branch type thing. I mean, they might just think there's like a squirrel on the branch or the wind's blowing, like something. They just don't pick up right away. Now, John Eberhart would tell you that I'm full of shit and that a deer doesn't do that. And I'm sure that deer where John's hunting, definitely do that and pick them off. But here in the burbs, I'm fortunate. So
Right, right. Yeah. And I've had the same thing happen where it's like I've had them look right through me and I thought the same thing. I was like, I kind of look like a tree branch hanging off. And I kind of follow the same approach that you do. I'm not way, leaned out, away from the tree. I kind of want to stay close to the tree, and I'm pretty vertical. I mean, I'm leaned enough to where I'm able to take a little bit of the weight off of my legs and put it into my saddle, right? To where it's like I'm putting it a little bit into my hips. But I'm still pretty vertical because I want to stay close to the tree because I want to use the tree as my cover.
yeah,
And so I don't want to be way out from it necessarily, right? And I think I think guys that I've talked to that were struggling with comfort, oftentimes there were two culprits for them. Usually whenever I would talk to them about, well, where do you have your tether set, right? Well, how are you setting up? Like what angle are you from the tree? Those were usually the two main things that once they tweak those, it was a world of difference for them. Because
absolutely.
they kind of get this idea that's like, oh, I got to lean back and take the weight off. And it's like, yeah, you'll be comfortable doing that for about 5 minutes. It's like, you want to stay a little bit more vertical and you keep from irritating the hot spots you're going to have in a saddle potentially is what you're really doing. Right.
Absolutely.
So it's that. And then tether height. It's like, I'm always like, somewhere between like chest and like chin high is like typically like my sweet spot. Everyone's a little bit different because everyone has longer torsos or whatever, but I'm like, that's a good guide to start and then just start moving it around and figure out where it's at. It's like, if you don't like that high angle, getting over your bridge to take a weak side shot, then you probably want to ride with it a little bit lower, right? Because it's going to give you a little less angle coming off the tree. And it's going to be a little easier for you to take those shots. If that doesn't bother you as bad, having a little higher might make you a little bit more comfortable. So it's all a give and take. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of what my guidance is.
Yeah. And you need to play with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to try, all the way above your head,
Yep.
all the way down at nipple height, and then work up and down it and figure out what you like more. So I like to run my tether right at eyebrow level for me.
Eyebrow? Okay.
Yeah. So the reason that I like that the most is it has a good kind of angle of your dangle. And it still has enough rope there. So when I'm taking a shot onto my offside, I like to put my right knee in the tree and then slowly rotate around and have my my hip, like the ball of my hip joint, up against the tree. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally sitting against the tree, like the tree is right where my right shoulder is, and I have my foot in the wing of the platform, and I'm sitting back like this, and I can shoot all the way 12 o'clock and pivot all the way back and keep rotating around and shoot all the way back around. And there's a very low movement doing that.
Yeah.
I found that to be the most successful. But when I run my tether lower, I'm unable to make that shot because there's not enough rope there.
Right.
And granted, I'm a tall guy. I have a long torso. You can probably do that maybe with a lower tether height. You got to play with it.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out. And then also adjusting your bridge length will make a big difference as well for comfort.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of my favorite parts about the whole like mobile hunting movement, if you will, is that there's just so many different ways to customize and make it fit exactly the way you want it. Right. And that's kind of,
that's part of
part
of what makes it so cool, man, is the fact that like, if you wanted to go hunt with a lock on and sticks, like that's your setup. Right. Yep. And like, yeah, you could add, padded backpack straps to it, or you could add, different sticks, I guess, or a different stand, but like the product that you're buying, that's basically it. Mm-hmm. The saddle is just the foundation to your setup. If you want a one stick, you can one stick. If you want to climb with an aider, you want to climb with spurs. If you want to have a ring of steps or a platform or a big platform or a medium platform or whatever you want, like it's available. And you can build a setup that weighs 15 pounds and you can build a setup that weighs half a pound and like everything in between. There are all these trade-offs, they're pros and cons, and it's totally up to your style of hunting. I mean, if you want to have just a bunch of trees prepped, you can have a bunch of trees prepped. If you, whatever you want to have, it's totally up to you, and you're still able to hunt from the saddle. And what I like about the saddle as well, I mean, there are obviously a ton of things I like about it, but I like that whether I'm going to a preset tree or if I'm going to a tree I've never climbed or maybe a tree that I've prepped but just has a bright eye in it and nothing else, my system doesn't change.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
my saddle's on my butt. I'm walking into the tree. I'm climbing the tree, you know, and I'm hanging from the tree. Like nothing is changing there.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, that repetition is very comforting in the fact that like I know that I don't have to think, okay, I'm going to that tree back there that has a ladder stand in it, but I haven't hunted it in 2 years, so I have to throw a ratchet strap in my backpack and make sure that, you know, I have enough time to fix the strap if it's broken, or I need to put my harness on, and I haven't hunted in it, you know, I need to throw another tree tether around it, like all the stuff that comes with it.
Yeah.
Or you get to the tree and it's like, well, where'd that tree stand go? Did somebody steal it? Like I haven't been back here for a year. You know,
that's the big thing for me, man. Is like one of the things for me that's, well, there's a couple things. Like there's a lot of stuff I like about it, right? But you know, there's been a couple for me. Like one is that I can actually change the setup on a hunt to fit whatever that hunt is going to be. Like I did it last year whenever I was in Missouri and Ohio. It's like sometimes I'll start out with a certain kind of rig, right? And I might get a couple days into it and be like, you know what, I'm tired of using this shit. Get rid of that, and then I'll slim it down to where it's just like, man, I'm taking hardly anything and just bare bones in it, right? Because maybe it's an area that I'm going to potentially have to hunt from the ground some, and I'm like, there's like a 50% chance I'm actually going to get into a tree. And so I'll just like strip it all down to where it's like I might only carry one stick, and I might carry my tether and my lineman's belt, and that's it. You know what I mean? And like, and I'm going, you know, and I might just use that stick as my platform, you know, depending, because I might be moving a lot, you know, and so it's like, it's modular in that way. And the other thing that you just mentioned that to me is why a public land hunter, you know, why it fits me really well for that is that one, I don't want my stuff getting stolen, so I pull it out all the time. But two, you also don't telegraph where you've been or where you're at. That's the other big thing for me, because how many times do you walk in? It's like, and I'll be scouting somewhere and I'll find someone's setup, and you can quickly tell by looking at their setup. It's like, are they a bow hunter? Or are they a gun hunter? Right? You can pretty quickly like assess what the situation is, and then you can also, based on you scouting there and looking at the sign, you can also quickly tell, like, do they know what they're doing or not, right? And if they do, and I'm like, this spot's really good, just because there's stuff there doesn't mean I'm not going to come and hunt that area. You know what I mean? It's like, because I'm going to bet they're probably going to hunt weekends. Maybe I'll put a camera in and monitor and see how often they're coming in or if they're coming in. And so now it's like, I just found another potential spot I'm gonna earmark. You know what I mean? And so it just kind of telegraphs things to folks, and you start to kind of, you know, do yourself a disservice to a degree.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's part of the reason that's one of the reasons that I started saddle hunting. I don't want people to walk through the woods and see where I'm hunting. I don't want people to, you know, either another hunter to be blood trailing a deer and then, you know, maybe trespass onto a property I have permission on and see my setup and be like, oh, like I can go ask this property owner for permission now.
Right.
Or I don't want anti-hunters to mess with my stuff, or some kid to be in the woods not knowing what he's doing and like climb my sticks and fall off of them. Right. So, you know, being out of sight, out of mind in an urban environment is worth its weight in gold. And I think on a public land stuff as well, you know, there's some properties that I hunt where I share with some guys, and like for whatever reason they'll think that the spots that I'm hunting are like these magical spots, and so if they can walk back there and know where I'm hunting, then all of a sudden they start hunting there, and it's like, you know, dude, I was just hunting here because, you know, it looked good or whatever, but now it's ruined because, you know, somebody else didn't take the time or attention on their access, or, you know, maybe they got busted by a doe. That to me is one of the most annoying and aggravating things that can happen, is if you know, you're in a tree and a doe walks in and immediately looks at the tree that you're hunting and then starts blowing, and you didn't get busted, you know that somebody else has been in there and screwed that up. Like that makes me a little pissy. So, you know, I found that hanging sticks when you hunt is really not that hard, or one sticking or whatever you're doing. Like it really doesn't change that much of your hunt. And like it keeps everybody out of your tree. It's amazing how few people want to take that extra little step of just carrying sticks in with them.
Yeah.
And sticks are light, man. They're like 4 pounds now. Like some sticks are as light as 4 pounds for 4 sticks.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like it just, or again, like the one sticking, because I know you've gotten into one sticking.
Yeah.
So I got into one sticking like a year ago. It's awesome, and like you can go as high as you want. There's no tree you can't climb. It's silent. It's fantastic. It's safe. There are really not any downsides to it, and it's really cool to rappel out of a tree.
Dude, it's the coolest thing. Like that's the one thing. Like it's funny because I actually, whenever I started kind of thinking about, setting up a one sticking system and stuff like that, I liked the idea of being able to climb with one stick. Like that was interesting because I only have to carry in one stick, right? But the thing that really kind of sold me on it more so than anything was the rappel out, and it is super cool. You're like Batman. I ain't gonna lie, right?
Yeah.
But the bigger thing for me was I don't know how many times I've gone to get out of a tree and I start to climb down and I've gotten caught like mid climb because it was too dark to shoot any longer. So I'm like, all right, take a quick check. There's no deer around. Let me slip out of here real quick, right? So I start to tear down all my stuff, and whenever I make the final check to go, all right, I'm going to descend now, I start making my descent down the sticks, and all of a sudden, deer pops out, right? Yep. I couldn't have shot it because it was too dark, but I'm now stuck on a stick, potentially going to get busted or whatever. So for me, it's like whenever I'm done with my hunt and I'm packed up and I want to get out of the tree, like I want out and I want out now. Like, yeah. And I want to, that was the biggest thing for me because I've had that happen too many times, and it was just a quicker way for me to get my stuff out of the tree, get down, packed up, and get out of the area before I booger anything up. That way I'm trying to save it so I can come back and potentially hunt it again.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, for me, I just like how fast it is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, if I'm using 4 sticks, for me to quietly climb down, put them back together, put all my stuff back in my pack the way that it's going to come back out, it's like about 15 to 17 minutes, like from the time that I'm like, okay, time to go to like walking back to the truck. And like, that just adds up. And so if I can just rip down the tree in about 30 seconds,
pull my line
down, put it back up, take my stick and roll. I mean, it's like maybe 90 to 120 seconds and I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And that, that's a big difference. It's a 13 to 15 minute difference.
Yeah. Huge difference. And for someone like me, who I'm oftentimes during the season too, trying to catch a morning hunt before work, right? To where I'll slip out and grab a quick hunt in the morning where I work remotely. So it's like, I got to just be back at my house, like signed on sometime around 9:30. It's not like super, I just have to get my work done, so, but I should be logged on by like 9:30. Right. So got to get back to the house by then. And that 15 minutes is like 15 more minutes of me hunting and potentially getting an opportunity to shoot something, or 15 minutes of me packing up to get back to the house so I can start work. And so that was a big kind of reason for me to build a system.
It's a big deal. I even started rappelling out of trees that I have preset. It's just that much faster.
Yeah.
Like if I have bolts in the tree, I just rappel right out of them.
Yep.
Done.
Yeah. Not to mention just how light it is too. I mean, it's like, cause I'm one sticking with the tethered one stick, which is a pound, you know what I mean? Plus my 30 feet of rope, and that's it. Like that's all I got. You know what I mean? So there's not I also use a lineman's rope when I'm climbing with that, but because you're tied in, you could theoretically go without it unless you have branches you have to get around. Then I would tie in whenever you're going around branches, of course, and stuff like that. Right. Yep. But it just, especially for like, because someone asked me, they were like, are you going to still 2-stick? And I said, I will probably 2-stick still in areas where I know exactly where I'm going to go. Right. I was like, I'd probably still 2-stick some of those places. I was like, but for out of state hunting, where, like, for example, I'm going to Kansas this year, may or may not be climbing a lot of trees. Depends on where exactly I end up and what the opportunity is. But I'm certainly not going to carry more stuff than I need to, because there's a high chance I'm going to be hunting from the ground a fair amount. So carrying one stick and 30 foot of rope in my pouch means I can climb any tree I want to get into, any nasty cottonwood that's out there that is a bitch to put sticks on. I can get into it, and I'm carrying next to nothing. So hunting from the ground is like I'm carrying a bunch of extra stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think a lot of guys that have gone to this like really aggressive public land, run and gun kind of style of hunting, like Zach Fehrenbach comes to mind, right? Like Zach's wearing his saddle. And he's like, sometimes I climb a tree, sometimes I just sit on the ground, but like my saddle's just with me.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of Western hunters haven't picked up on the saddle hunting yet, but if I was hunting out West, I mean, I would definitely have a saddle in my pack because, I mean, if you come across a wallow or something early season that's just destroyed, climb a tree and sit. I mean, a big bull literally cannot look up, right? I mean, his antlers will prevent him from looking up. So I would definitely be up in one of those aspen trees trying to crack old Mr. Bugling bull in a wall.
Old Mr. Bugler.
Yeah. Plus, I'm not trying to walk a bunch, so that would really suit my hunting style.
Right.
Very well.
It's funny you say that because my buddy, I don't know if you know him from like the Beast Forum or whatever, but Tim Bunau, he was from from New York. He lives out in Montana now. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago or something like that. I think I might have posted something after I sewed a climbing leader together. I was out practicing one sticking, climbing, stuff like that. And he sent me a text and he was like, hey, he's like, how do you think a saddle system would work out West? And it's funny you say that because we literally just traded texts about that a few weeks ago. And I'm pretty sure it was Tim, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, dude, I think it would be killer. I was like, why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? I was like, you're not carrying a whole lot extra, and if you have the opportunity to get into a tree where you're going to watch a ravine or something like that for some mule deer or whatever the case is, it's like that, or he hunts some whitetails out there too, some big whitetails. And I was like, especially whitetail hunting, I was like, I'd certainly have one. And then my other buddy who lives in Montana asked me the same thing. Damn it, why can't I think of his name now? All of a sudden, I just Scheimer. Why can't I? That's terrible, dude. He's like one of my good friends, and I just totally blanked on his first name. His last name is Scheimer, though. It's the guy I went elk hunting with. But he asked the same thing like last year. He's like, do you think this would work? And I was like, and said the same thing you said. I was like, dude, a wallow? You got a killer wallow set up? I was like, I don't know why you wouldn't use one.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, granted, I'm certainly not a Western hunting
Scheimer.
expert.
Jesus, there you go, Luke Scheimer. Damn,
love you, Luke.
Yeah,
I'm certainly not a Western hunter by any means, but I'm pretty sure you can drill, like, you can screw into trees out West, as long as it's not on like BLM land. I think on like, or some of the like public access land. Definitely check the regs if you live out West and you're going to try this, but. I mean, you could take like carbon bolts and a little hand drill and put that in your pack along with the saddle, and you're at like nothing weight wise, like maybe 5 pounds.
Yeah, it weighs less than your spotter that you got in your pack.
100%.
Yeah,
it weighs less than what I eat for breakfast for sure. and I would just have that. It would just live there. And then if you need to climb a tree, like you have it, or you just climb up the branches. I mean, like you could very easily, not need a climbing stick in your pack and still be able to hunt very efficiently out West. I would 100% do it.
Yeah, for sure. Man, with all this gear talk, dude, I'm always curious with any new gear that anyone is adding to their kit for the upcoming season, because I'm a little bit of a gear nerd. This year, I've actually stayed pretty I haven't made a bunch of changes this year. It's like the first year in a while that I haven't kind of rearranged things. But I'm always curious what other guys are doing. So any swaps this year for gear that you're adding or removing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always tinkering with stuff. I started shooting a smaller fixed blade this like late winter this year, and really liking the results of it. So I had been shooting I test a ton of different broadheads. I helped with the Rage Hypodermics in prototype phase like forever ago. I loved that head. My only concern with that head was the blade angle on it. So I like when I'm hunting really tight properties, I like shooting a big mechanical, like a rear deploying mechanical, just because the difference in a deer running 30 yards and 50 yards and dying is a big deal to me.
It's like whether it's in the woods or on someone's front doorstep.
Yeah, or like in another pool, which I never want that to happen.
That was terrible. I remember you told me that. That's bad news.
But I mean, so like, and there's still some properties that I prefer to have a big cut on contact or a big opening mechanical head. But the downside to that is if you hit any type of bone, like you're in trouble. And so I messed around with some different mechanicals, wasn't super happy. And, for me, like I want a head that is forgiving, right? So I want it forgiving in flight where if my form's not perfect because I'm twisted up like a big old pretzel, I want it to still hit its mark. And if I don't hit like a perfect bullseye X, I want to have the biggest cutting surface possible to like make up for me, right? And cut as much shit as it can. So I tinkered around with a couple different heads. I shot the Ramcats for a while. I really liked the Ramcat, like 125s. My only concern with the Ramcats were they were a little louder in flight than some other heads. They kind of have like a little distinct whistle to them. And the blades weren't super durable, which is fine. Like if you're shooting it through a deer, you're good. And they were just kind of like a pain in the ass to get in and out of your quiver because they're literally so big. It's like an over 2 inch. But
they're devastating. The deer that I shot with those, it was just like ridiculous the wound that you would get. But I had all the same issues you had.
Yep. Yeah. And the quiver, the thing that irritated me about the quiver was, if there's back pressure on it, it'll actually, the way that the screw that holds the blade in, it'll pull it loose and it'll be a little loose. And then that head's basically
useless
like
on that hunt.
For that hunt. Yeah. So I started shooting the day 6 heads and, I shot both the 1.25 inch and the standard 1 inch. And the 1 inch head with the 3/4 inch bleeder that was a prototype when I was shooting a lot of deer with it and is now available is like awesome. So nice. It's an 1 3/4 cut, that's coming through there. It is solid steel and it is doing a lot of damage. Nice. And so that head to me was like finally the perfect combination of a head that's super tough. It's going to blow through whatever it hits, but it's still got a big enough cutting surface area that it's forgiving with your shot placement, as much as possible with those trade-offs. So I put that head in play. Really like that. Trying to think what else.
And Brian's just a good dude too, man. It's like I've been shooting his arrows, or killer arrows, so no complaints there.
Yeah, and his arrows are great.
Yeah.
I've been shooting his arrows for 4 years now. They're tough as hell. I've got one that I just keep seeing how many deer I can put it through. I'd have to count the tallies on it, but I think I'm at like 14 or 15 deer, and it's been crazy. Like off rocks and all this stuff, and it's good to go. So love his heads, love his components, love his arrows. I'm just trying to think through what else. I got some, the one sticking. I switched to the 8mm ropes that Tether came out with, and it's funny like how much of a difference the 8mm makes. If you're not one sticking, you can get both your lineman's belt and your tree tether in just one cis hauler. So it's just way less bulk.
Wow.
Way less BS.
I might have to. So does that work with the Mad Rock?
I'd have to check the spec. I think it's out of spec by like 1/10 of a.
That's what I thought. Well, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think the Mad Rock says 8.1 millimeters or more on it.
That 1/10.
Yeah, nice. Although I mean, the the Sterling Oplex, I think, is 9 millimeters.
Yeah.
And it works pretty well. But yeah, so the
what
8
stick are
mil
you using? What stick are you using for your one stick?
Carl made me
Yeah.
a stick, but I have also been using the tethered one stick. The tethered one stick is much quieter for one sticking than the one that Carl made me that has the it has like the muddy type cam cleat
The
on
cam
it.
cleat, yeah.
Yeah. That's spring loaded, and so if you're not like careful when you disengage it, it'll get a little pingy to it.
Yeah, because I made one before I got my one sticks. I made a one stick setup where I had a bunch of pieces here from cut down sticks I'd made previously, and so I just bought components, put a cam cleat on it, and had the same thing where it's like I tried all the tricks to where it's like you can take paracord and put in between the cam cleats so it doesn't kind of like clap shut on you and stuff like that. But I just never got it to be quiet, and so I switched over, just used the tethered stick for that purpose because it's just quieter.
And actually, that the way that the Dynalock button works on that tethered one stick is like awesome.
Oh yeah. Stick. Well, not just that, but it's like when you're using that cam cleat, you kind of have to hold like you got to take your rope that you're running through your cam cleat and kind of hang it over your step or whatever the case is, right? Because if it falls down, it's kind of a bitch to get a hold of or whatever. Yep. But there's enough length on the tethered one stick that I literally just, the way the sticks are, because they're kind of open, the way the standoff is kind of built into the step, there's that opening there. I just pull it through that and hang it there. That way it's always right there. I don't need to like have another like doohickey on there like to clip it or anything like that to not lose my rope. I just slide it through that and I'm good to go.
Yeah, it works really well. So I actually have been one sticking with the one stick for some time now, and
nice.
I like how simple the one stick is. I like that there are no moving parts on it. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that can like wear out or break over time. The way that roll pin runs through it, like it's solid. It's not going anywhere.
And sharp as shit. Like I've cut my knuckles on that thing multiple times.
Dude, it bites a tree so hard. I mean, it is so solid on a tree, and I just love that like little curve that the step has. I mean, you can get that tree at like the stick at like almost a 25 or 30 degree angle, and it's not going anywhere. So, like that a lot. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Like I've been focusing really on just having a ton of different options. I spend a lot of time this time of year like blowing out trails to trees. Like I'm really, really meticulous when it comes to my access, my ingress and egress on a place to hunt. And I'm even funnier about it because I make sure those trails aren't visible from the road, right? So like if you drove by a property, you're not going to see like a little trail in the leaves and like want to go investigate it.
Right.
But
that's hard to do where you're at too, man, because you're around roads everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'll take bright eyes and like put them in a circle on a property if I see guys out there trying to follow them. Like I try to make it as hard as possible to find where I'm hunting as you can, because it only takes one screw up to educate those deer, and then it's game over. So I was running a different vehicle. I had a Tacoma for a while. That I had a deck system in that was like super organized, and I organized my topper on it. I recently bought a 4Runner instead, so I've been like rigging that out with a ton of kit, which has been fun. Nice. I put molly like stuff all on the inside of it, like metal molly attachments with a shelf across the middle. So I've been having a good time like kitting out my deer sled and all my stuff in there to make it like a somewhat discreet killing machine.
Right.
Something else I went to about a year ago now, I started hunting with a hinge, which was like a really, really big transition to make for a guy who's, shot a lot of deer not using a hinge.
Right.
And I really it took a while to get used to this, but I really like not having to worry about anything in like the back half of my shot sequence. Right. So, Like I just anchor, and all I have to worry about is my pin float, and I just let it float, and I know that the arrow is going to hit its spot just perfectly.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with that?
Probably about a dozen deer.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's something I've always kind of had an interest in eventually transitioning to. At my buddy's archery shop, I pulled one back, and it's the weirdest thing. It just, I mean, because I shoot a thumb release, so like everything kind of felt normal. And I was using one that had a safe on it. That way I didn't punch myself in the face. You know what I mean?
Very important to do that.
Yeah, because I for sure will do that.
I definitely did.
Yeah. But even once I got it back, like you would think, or at least I thought, like once I was back, I was like, all right, so once I click the safe off, you know, I just gotta pull, right? And it's as simple as pull, but I was surprised at some of the trouble I was having getting it to fire. Cause I thought, I was like, man, this thing will just like take off on me. You know what I mean? But there's a method to like dumping, like getting it to dump. You know, I shouldn't say getting it to dump, but to getting it to pop off.
Yeah, the key, especially with one that has a safety on it. So I hunt with the one that has a safety on it because I just feel like, just for me personally, it would be inviting disaster into a hunt to not have it have a safety on it. But you need to make sure that when you take the safety off, your hand is as vertical as possible. Like your knuckles are completely vertical. Because then that rotation, if you take the safety off and your hand is already rotated, it's very hard to rotate it more.
Right.
But I really, really like, and it's totally personal preference. Like some guys just like to feel like they're pulling, and then maybe like a tension activated release is better. Right. I don't like to feel like I'm pulling because I find that when I'm pulling, if I get to the point where I'm like still pulling and that shot hasn't broken, I get this,
you
like,
start to freak out. Yeah.
And then I push and pull really hard, and I push the shot like really, really badly.
Yeah.
So with a hinge, like I know, like I can feel that my hand's rotating, and there's this weird like subconscious comfort in that for me that I just like, I know it'll break. I just got to keep rotating it slowly, and then it's just like, okay, let the pin float, and the pin floats, and then just it breaks. And there were a couple times early on in that first dozen deer that I shot that the shot broke when the pin was not in the right spot. And it was like an oh shit moment. And then I watched the deer fall over. That's crazy. It took a while to like trust that what you're seeing in your eyes and feeling like is delayed, and that like your subconscious knows when the shot needs to break. It knows where you're aiming. And if you just focus on where you want the arrow to go and just let your like body do its thing, it works out.
That's crazy.
And so now I feel like any deer that is, I mean, not that I didn't feel that any deer was in danger around me before, but like now they're really in danger because like I feel like I'm just hitting inside out X's all the time. So
nice.
That's good. And I've been working into my gear, bunch of prototype goodies here coming down the line. So we'll see what more can be improved on in the lineup. There's some stuff that's great. I've been messing with what I've been calling my man purse of death, which I think is just going to be super awesome.
Man purse of death. I hope it keeps that name.
I'm keeping, yeah. Oh, for sure. This is a video that I'm going to drop here sometime in the next couple of weeks. I think I'm going to have it perfected. But basically, I've been trying to figure out an easier way to carry all the stuff to the tree. So what started bothering me in my like efficiency analness was I didn't like getting to the tree, taking my backpack off, and like taking all the shit that I'd carried to the tree and then organizing it all myself. Right. Mm-hmm. So prior to my man purse of death, my satchel of death, I feel like Alan from The Hangover. Prior to my satchel of death.
Great analogy.
I'm a one-man wolf pack, baby.
That's right.
So prior to this, my system would be for either a one-stick hunt. Let's say for a hunt where I have 4 sticks on that I'm using. So I'd walk into the tree. I'd have my sticks on my pack. I'd have my platform on my pack, and I'd have all my filming gear. That's just a lot of crap to have on your back. So you get to the tree, take your backpack off, take your sticks, put your sticks on the side of the tree, take your platform. I put my platform on my tailbone. Then I would put my pack back on my back, and then I would like climb the tree, hang my platform, clip in, hang my camera arm, hang my camera, hunt. So what I'm working on now is a solution to where the backpack doesn't have to come off my back. I walk up to the tree, and I'm able to just start ascending the tree, regardless of if it's a 1 stick or 4 sticks or however many sticks you want to hunt with. So I think we're in the final stages of that. I'm waiting for like 2 more parts to come in, and we're going to be there. I'm hoping. I'm very optimistic. So
nice.
Hopefully we're there.
Nice. I was just going to say that that would be killer, because that's one of my biggest pet peeves is the same thing. It's like I have to unpack before I unpack. It's like it's the same thing. I got to take all my stuff. I got to take the pack off, pull my sticks off, pull my platform off, to do all the same stuff you just said, climb, and then when you get up there, then you're taking more stuff out of your pack, and then you're doing the reverse once you get down.
And it's cumbersome. It's and you're kind of like at the base of the tree for a while. It takes you a while to like pack up, to unpack, to climb. You're leaving scent. So we'll see how this works. I mean, it could fail miserably, but well,
man, if you need another tester, dude, I'm all yours, dude. Because
absolutely,
I have the same pain.
Definitely going to need lots of testing if this pans out. So it'll be cool, but. Yeah, I mean that's worked great. I've been running the First Light Spectre stuff. So Spectre, I was like, it's so cool to be able to work with prototype gear, but at the same time, I'm like the most terrified person on earth, because I feel like I'll be, panning around on like an Instagram story, and then I have to delete it because I've like accidentally shown product or like a new bow or something. And so I'm terrified to be the guy whose pictures are all over the forums. Right. But yeah, being able to use the Spectre stuff was awesome. Nice. And it was really cool to be able to incorporate that into my gear kit. The camo pattern works really well. Obviously, staying still works better than any camo pattern, but
ultimate camo.
Yeah, the ultimate camo is not having ADD and bouncing around the tree like a ferret on meth. But yeah, it's like it's definitely been nice to be able to get bailed out though when I am playing on Instagram and Dozilla sees me down below.
Right. What camera arm are you using?
So
when you're self filming.
Yeah, so I've been running the 4th Arrow Talon. And I modified mine. So what I did was I felt like the base of the Talon shouldn't be vertical, right? Mm-hmm. So it comes off at a 90 degree. And it kept bending in on me. So what I did was I bent the legs out on it to about a 45 degree, and it works way better. Really? Yeah, I sent them an email and they ignored it. So hopefully they're implementing that. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like the 45 degree makes way more sense because it gives it like more bite rather than being susceptible to getting buckled in on.
Right. What camera are you using?
So I run that on a cam over buckle, like people were running Ring of Steps for a while.
Yeah.
I think that's like really helpful. I'm using a Sony AX700 camcorder.
Okay.
I bounce back and forth between a Sony A7 III and that AX700. The benefits of the A7 III is like that depth of field is amazing. Low light performance is amazing. Battery life is pretty good. I have like an extended battery grip on the bottom of it. The negatives to it are no flippy screen, total killer, right? Being able to flip the screen around is really worth its weight in gold. Well, I guess it's not, because the A7S III has that capability, but it's like $3,500 for the body, and I'm just not that in need of it.
Right.
So yeah, the AX700 works really well, man. Like you can run it in manual mode, slow down the shutter speed. and it'll do everything you need it to. I like being able to put it in. You can put it in a mode called portrait mode, where you can get like really good depth of field still, where you get this like nice bokeh in the background, or just run it like a fixed. Camcorder is called an iris, but it's basically a fixed f-stop, and it works great. So I've been happy with that. The battery life's amazing. I don't have to worry about having like 2 or 3 batteries with me. One battery runs the entire time. I don't have to worry about, swapping out lenses. It's just less clutter in my pack. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Running like a GoPro or something for a second angle, I think is really important to like help get B-roll, or just like be able to break up your shots to where it's more engaging to the viewer.
Yeah.
What are you running for your stuff?
I've gone back and forth like for the past couple years, where it's like I would take the camera some, and then I would get fed up with the setup, and I would just not take it for half the season or whatever. And so last year I finally got stuff kind of ironed out to where the camera didn't become a hindrance any longer. And so I actually was using the Lone Wolf Custom Gear camera arm, because it's super small, fits in my pack, right? And I actually took one of the arms off of it, so I just have 2, I guess 2 extensions or whatever, as opposed to 3, because I don't think you need to 3. At least I don't feel like I need it. Then a Sony AX53 camcorder, or 4K camera, and then a GoPro for a second angle. And that setup for me has been, I'll put it this way, it keeps me taking the camera out. Because for me, it's like I'm not so hell-bent on getting all the footage. Like, so if it becomes a hindrance or it becomes a pain in the ass, I just won't take it. It's like I'm going out to hunt, and if the camera doesn't fit into the hunt, then it just isn't going to go, And this was the first setup that I ever had where it was like everything felt stable. I was able to get like good footage, and it also wasn't a pain in the ass to set up when I got into the tree. Nothing makes noise, like, all the different things that can go wrong when you're filming. It's like just that camera arm alone kind of felt like it stabilized everything and helped make everything else make sense.
How do you like that Lone Wolf Custom Gear arm? And have you had any issues like locking it down, or you just kind of tighten it and cam it over and screw it out?
It's funny because I had that same thought when I was looking at it, and then my buddy or Chad Sylvester had the same thought, and he actually got the camera arm before me and was using it. And I asked him, because I was like, man, it feels like that thing would kick out. And he's like, man, I thought the same thing. He's like, but it won't do it. He's like, it's rock solid. And so I got one and was practicing with it and playing with it and stuff like that before I use it. And man, once you get it locked in, you set it back, like you set the set screw all the way, out essentially, right? Or backed out rather. And then you kind of put it up against a tree, get it set your left and right, get your bubble close, right? Then you start kind of screwing it in. As you're screwing it in, you're pulling down on it, pulling down on the arm to kind of give it room. You're just kind of trying to keep the bubble right. Then as you get close to getting the set screw into the tree, you just kind of make one final like little adjustment for it, and then screw it in. And then that thing's just like rock solid. I put my camera on it, and I would take it and grab it and like try to shake it, and it's not going anywhere. And it's the oddest thing, because the 2 teeth at the bottom just like bite. And it's like, I even mentioned to, Zach, my buddy Zach Shermer, when we were in Missouri last year. I don't know if you know Zach or not, but Zach filmed me for the tethered stuff last year in Missouri, and awesome camera dude. And he was running a 4th Arrow arm too, if I'm not mistaken. And I kept kind of telling him, like, man, you just need to get one of these Lone Wolf Custom Gear arms, because it make your setup so much lighter, And he wasn't using like a huge camera, because I mean that Lone Wolf arm will hold up to like 5-10 pounds or whatever it is. And he was
using, I mean, if you have 10 pounds on the tree, you need to take a bigger arm. And that's like a super professional camera setup, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and he was using a Black Magic 6K, I think is what he was using. And I don't know what that would weigh. And he had a rig on it too, like a cage on it. So it was probably pretty close 5 pounds, I would say. But I think that camera arm would work fine with it.
That's
especially
awesome.
For anything that you're doing like for YouTube.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Look, some of my buddies are filming hunts, and they're just using like 360 cams and just going back in after and editing the footage all out. And it's like, they don't have to worry about anything. They're like shooting in freaking like 9K and just,
Yeah.
zooming in, and it's like, man, that's a lot easier. And that's kind of one of the things I like about the camcorder versus the like a traditional like mirrorless camera is that mirrorless camera has a time limit on it, and so you can get to a point where like it'll like not record what you're aiming at. And the last thing I want is to have like a serious encounter with a target animal that I want to document, what I'm like the experience that I had with this critter, and then have the camera have cut out by the time the shot happens. I mean, for me, when I'm in a spot and I go into a kill mode, like I'm putting the camera down, I'm pointing it at the area that the animals are in, and I'm like, F this thing, I'm trying to kill them.
That's exactly it, man. It's like, I think I know where it's going to be, and I point the camera there when I get set up. And that's the beauty of shooting in 4K is you just leave it wide angle to give yourself the largest margin of error. And then if you have time, if it comes from a completely different area, well then sure, like move the camera and get back into position or whatever. But like, if you have your hunt dialed in pretty well and you think you know what's going to happen, you can set it beforehand, and all you got to do is hit the record button, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. And I'm just not trying to mess with. I don't need another thing to potentially have me get busted in the tree, right? Like I just want to point the camera at where I think I'm gonna shoot the animal and then let it go. So when you're setting up, I guess if you're running your tree tether at like chest height, how are you setting your tree up with your pack and your camera arm? Like how are you found to be the most
it's funny. I did a video on that because it was just I was playing around with all of it. The way I set it, I'm right-handed, of course, right? So my camera arm's going on my right-hand side, and I'm actually setting that camera arm right about like if I were to sit, it would be about knee high is usually where I set it. That way, if I am standing and I'm leaned back, I can just lean forward a little bit and grab the camera arm, and I'm good to go. That way, I can move it from like sitting or standing, And so it might be just a little higher than knee high. But then that's the other reason why I like that custom gear arm is because it's got a pack hook underneath of it. And so I'm using my my daisy chain webbing, that I'm using to kind of hang all my gear, but I'm hanging my pack underneath my camera arm. So it keeps all that out of the way and keeps like now when my weak side shot used to be cluttered because my pack was usually hanging there. Now it's completely out of the way. My bow's on the left-hand side. I built like a little public land hanger out of the Kydex like Greg did, right? I built one of those so I could slip my bow in. And that's really everything that's hung in the tree. So it's like my tree's pretty clean now, like in front of me. I don't really have anything hanging in my way. Everything basically stays in my pack. I get out what I need, hang it in front of me, off my daisy chain webbing in front of me. If I, whether it's a grunt tube or whatever, binos are on my chest, camera arm to the right, pack underneath the camera arm, bow on the left-hand side, quiver on the back side of the tree with a Kydex hook, and that way it's not in my way of, taking a shot. But that's pretty much the setup.
I think that's key. The key is to like keep your gear out of the way for the most extreme like places you could end up in on the tree. Because a lot of the time, I feel like deer just have this like sixth sense of knowing just how to make it the hardest possible way for you to shoot them. And so like I can't tell you how many times I've had to like get around the tree and I've had to like move stuff out of the way because
like use your elbow and move your pack out of the way and whatever.
And then it's like flopping around behind you. You can feel it hitting you in the back and you're like, oh no. But yeah, so I mean I do the same thing. I have my I run my his strap at about like top of head height, so above my tether. And then I have my bow like right at 9 o'clock on the tree. I run my pack on the back side right around like 1 o'clock, so where I can't get to around back. And then I put my camera arm pretty high, almost like right above my tether, so that I can go above the top of my tether for that like my standard shot. And then if I need to rotate back, I can kind of pull it back, or my tether will actually move it for me if I'm rotating around the tree.
Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting, man. I never thought of that. That's pretty high then. That's like your camera arm is like, so when you're standing, where would your camera arm be at on your body?
So it's right below my tether. So my tether height is like right at eyebrow level.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm standing, the base of my camera arm is like right at like chin throat level. So yeah, the key is you don't want to get it too high because you don't want to have to like reach up and make a hand motion when you're going up to grab it. But I can get it kind of like right here and move it. And what it does for me is it just creates like a pretty cool camera angle because it's almost like when I'm down in my saddle and I'm taking a shot, the camera is actually over the shoulder where like a camera guy would be. So it kind of gives like a very traditional like feel.
Right.
It's just a cool perspective to it. But also I just find that's not why I do it. I just do it because it's the most efficient way that I've found for it to be.
Right.
Sometimes I tried putting it on the left side of the tether, but like I need that space when I go around the tree. So putting it kind of back over at the like 4 o'clock position and having the ability to go over, but then pull it back and it's not in the way has ended up the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah, I think when I put it low, I'm hanging it right around like 4 to 5 o'clock roughly. Yeah. But that's interesting.
Your tether's so short that you don't have an issue going under it if you need to.
Right, right.
For me, you have a steep angle there. Like my angle was more vertical to where if I needed to go under it, I kind of had to like push back, and I just could see that being potentially problematic at some point of a hunt.
Right. That's interesting though, man. I might have to give that a try. That also probably works out pretty well because what you were saying earlier, you like to sit to shoot. You like to use your hip up against the tree. And I would say like almost always I'm standing to shoot. Like I just prefer to stand to shoot, which might make it a little harder for like my cams clearing that potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a major issue. I always drop a knee into the tree when I'm shooting. Okay. So if I'm working, around the tree this way, I'll drop my knee, I'll drop my left knee into the tree and I'll start pushing around to kind of create separation. But what I find is it allows you to put all of your weight into your saddle. Mm-hmm. And so now my feet are only there to guide me around the tree. And it's like a very controlled pivot. Mm-hmm. And so what that allows me to do is like, if I'm mid pivot, I'm never at the mercy of gravity, just swinging. Like uncontrolled. And so I'm able to like slowly control the speed at which I'm coming around the tree. So if there are, if there are 3 or 4 deer there and I'm trying to shoot, a certain one, I don't have to worry about getting picked by all of them because I'm slowly moving, bow ready and then drawing and shooting.
Right.
Or sometimes full draw before and whatever the situation dictates. But I like having that ability to maneuver around on the platform and use my feet strictly for placement.
Right.
And if you need to keep rotating, it's very easy to roll from knee in the tree into like hip on the tree. And then like even pushing off hard.
Come back around the back side. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's slick, man.
And you're swinging with your arm the entire time to where you're constantly like ready to shoot. Like you're never once not in a position where you can't shoot. Whereas if you're going over the bridge, there's potentially a spot where it's like, oh shit, it's looking at me, and you're kind of frozen in time there. And maybe if you're doing that, sometimes you're relying too much on your muscles to like hold you in that position. Yeah. In that waiting game that everybody's been caught in, and you get that feeling of like, how could that deer possibly still be looking at me?
Exactly. Man, that would have saved my ass last year because I'll use my knee if I'm shooting 12 to 1 o'clock and I can shoot from the front side of the tree to keep my strong side shot to where I'm not having to shoot weak side or whatever. I'll use my knee. I think that's the only time I've ever used my knee is I shot a doe at like 1 o'clock and I was able to slip around the front side of the tree because she was behind some brush. So it was easy for me to slip around, use my knee and shoot her, across the front side of the tree. Last year, I blew an opportunity on one of my shooters on like the freaking, I guess it was like the week of Thanksgiving or something like that. It was like the last week of rut here in PA. it was like 3 different shooters I'd been watching for a course of time. And I got back from like the out of state hunt, and, you know, PA, we were allowed to hunt that last week of rut, or like the week that we usually don't get to hunt between gun season and bow season. And, or at least in my area I could. And, I went out, and like 7:30 zombie walked in, and I saw him. I saw a deer, and I thought it was a doe. I didn't pick up my bow. It was going back to like what we were talking about earlier of burnout. I just got back from a 2-week, 14, 15 day trip hunting every day, all day long. And I was just fried. And when I saw the deer, I was like, I had a cell camera nearby, and I knew there was a bunch of does hitting this one script. I just thought it was going to be another doe. Right. And I was like, oh, it's probably a doe. And I'm sitting there and watching, and I saw some antlers, or not antlers. I saw like what I knew was bone of some sort, but there was also like a young, like forky that had been hitting that scrape pretty frequently too with those does. So I was like, I convinced myself that it was a doe or that buck. And he popped his head out of the brush, and it was sure as shit one of the 3 shooters I'd been kind of watching and wanting to kill. And once he crossed that brush, there wasn't anything between me and him except like air and opportunity at that point. And he was at like 20 yards, you know? And I got real still and grabbed my bow. I wanted to get up over my bridge, when the reality was I should have just sat down and pivoted super slow, because he never looked up at me until he got directly behind me at 5 yards. And if I would have done that, I probably would have had time to get a quick shot off. But I just brain froze. I didn't think about it, and he ended up smelling me at that point, and he was gone, and that was it.
It's easy to do, man, especially at like 5 yards, where you're just like,
what do I do? What do I do? Like,
yeah, what's happening? Like, and then you're like, oh, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up.
Famous last words of someone who screws this up.
Yeah.
But
funny how that works. Yeah. And
exactly.
it's just, you know, I've done the same thing though, where you're like, it's just a dink buck or whatever. And then like by the time the deer's on you, you're like, shit, I should have grabbed my bow. Like I want to shoot that thing, you know?
Yeah.
So when in doubt, I just grab my bow, but I'm also, I'm not too picky about what I'm putting in the freezer. So.
Right. Yeah. It's last year was a crazy year, man. Cause it's like, I had, I ate 3 tags in 3 states, but I had a chance to kill a good deer in every state. Like I hit one in Missouri and lost it, which sucked. You know, that was awful. The last day in Ohio, I had a shooter come by, but I thought I was going to come back the week after Thanksgiving. So I passed him, and my wife's whole family got COVID. And so we never made it back for Thanksgiving. So I ate that tag. No. I should have filled that one. And then I screwed that hunt up the week before Thanksgiving in Pennsylvania on one of the shooters. It's like I had all 3 of them should have been filled last year. I should have went 3 for 3, but I managed to screw all of them up.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the fun in hunting though, right? I mean, I had a pretty unsuccessful year last year when it comes to like putting bone on the ground. We filmed a series for First Light that'll be dropping here probably in like September, October, where we were traveling around the country, like showing off how the new Spectre worked.
Right.
So we started in September in Kentucky, and it was like 100 degrees every day. We're hunting this place that we got access to by knocking on doors. Like we weren't, the whole key was like, we're not going to do the traditional go to these outfitters and just like smash giants, you know, like that's not relatable. So we went and we got permission on all these spots ourselves. We hunted this guy's like 400-acre farm, had a bunch of soybeans in it, had good deer in it. And I came home after that hunt. Like I didn't get a chance at the deer I wanted. You'll have to watch to see what happened in the episode. But I came home and I played in a golf tournament with one of my buddies. And the next morning, the day after the 3-day tournament, I just felt terrible. I walked my daughter to school and I came home and I laid down on the couch and I was like, I'm dying. My wife was like, you are such a pea, you know, like get up. You're such a baby. You're just hungover because you can't drink and party like that anymore. And I'm like, no, I don't feel good. I felt like I'd been beaten with a baseball bat from like head to toe,
Right.
and my muscles ached. I took my temperature, it was like 104. And I'm
Jeez.
like, well, that's not good. Right.
Right.
And so I kept going to the doctors. They kept telling me they thought I had COVID, even though my COVID tests were coming back negative because I was super achy, like head to toe. And I had a fever that wouldn't break. And then finally, like I kept telling them, like, look, I was in Kentucky. I was covered in ticks. We were like camping at at this hunt. And finally it came back that my Rocky Mountain spotted fever count was like off the chart high.
Jeez.
Like the doctor was like, dude, this is so high. And I'm like, I told you I don't feel good, man. Like it's not COVID. Like my body hurts. I have this fever that won't go away. I'm like aimlessly wandering around my house. And of course, to make matters worse, my wife was convinced it was COVID. So I'm like quarantined in the basement. Right. I have 2 young kids. I'm trying not to get sick. And it was just a nightmare. But it turned out that I had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which thankfully isn't Lyme's disease and it goes away. But it was like the worst, like 2 to 3 weeks of my life. And so I went from that hunt. I missed a hunt in Wisconsin that I was like really excited about with like Jeff Sturgis and some buddies up there.
Yeah.
Because I was just so sick and we didn't know what was going on. And then so I went up to our place in Ohio, my lease that I have with my buddy Billy, and I was like jacked. We had 4 deer over 150 on camera, like all the time. And, I just was like super aggressive, bounced around everywhere. And finally on the last day, I saw this deer that we call Grandpa. That's like 180-inch typical. That was just absolutely amazing. And I had him at like 70 yards through brush and just couldn't get a shot at him. But it was super cool to see a deer that in person.
For sure.
Gross boomer, but also didn't kill anything. In a week-long hunt there. And then I went, where else did I go? I think Missouri. And then came back here. And of course, like while I was on all these trips, I'm getting cell phone pictures of like deer that I want to shoot here moving around. So I just felt like I kind of like strayed too far and was too spread thin and just wasn't able to like stick to my game plan, and just was not successful on any wall hangers, which is probably for the better because I went to Africa like 3 years ago, and I got all my taxidermy back this year. I took 2 trips from the taxidermist of like
oh jeez.
So my wife was just like, no more heads in the basement. And I was
no
like,
more heads.
Okay. Wink,
yeah,
wink.
Sure. Wink. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Until I shoot one bigger than the other ones on the wall.
Right. Exactly. That's how that works, man.
But and so I guess from like a perspective of like just notching tags, I had a very unsuccessful year, but it's always fun for me to like, I'm trying to always learn. And so like, it's probably more successful for me to not have had, harvests, because again, I'm super analytical, and the best thing I can do in my 6 hours from Ohio back here is to like think through
how I screwed that up.
Yeah. Like where I should have been. And like, it's so easy to try and bounce around though in Ohio. I mean, I have like 500 acres there that are untouched, and I got food plots on them, and we put a ton of work in, and they're just deer everywhere. And you're just like, you're just trying to like make it happen instead of like just realizing that, hey, look, like these deer are there for a reason. They're going to be bedded in the same spot, whatever. Like,
don't overthink it.
Get in a pinch point and sit. It's the rut. They're looking for love. And there are a lot of hills here. There are only a handful of places these guys can go. Right. But so it's just been fun. Using all these different things. Something else that I started using about a year ago that we're talking about gear that really changed the way I hunted. And I didn't think it would be that big of an influence until I started using it. Have you heard of Spartan Forge at all, or used any of their?
Yeah, man. Yeah, product? I've had Bill on. Bill, super good dude. I think it was right after he was on with Garrett, whatever it was, year ago or something like that. I had him on and we talked about it, And I'm a little bit of like a nerd in that way because I work in like, that's what I don't do what he does for a living, but I'm, I guess, a digital strategist. So I play in the digital space a lot, you know? And so anytime there's gear that I can use that is digital in nature to help me kind of understand better or remove clutter and paint clearer pictures for me, I'm super into, you know? And so I'm super stoked with what he's got coming out next, for sure.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline that I was fortunate enough to play with, and it really was eye-opening to me. So like there were a lot of times that, you know, here where I hunt, I can drive around and see a lot of deer. Like they're pretty visible.
Right.
And so when I've had these discussions in the past with people where, you know, like people say, do you think barometric pressure affects a deer? Do you think the moon affects a deer or whatever? I'm like, look, I don't know what affects a deer, but I know that there's some biological switch that gets flipped based on a combination of things that where there are times that I can drive around at 2:00 in the afternoon and I can see 300 deer in a 10-mile loop. Right.
Yeah.
And there are other times that I can drive around like the day after or like something that I think are the same conditions a week later, whatever it is at the same time and see no deer. Right. So these are different pockets of deer. They're not just one family group that a dog kicked up or something. There's something that's happening that's causing deer to get on their feet. And so when I met Bill and talked with him, I was just really selfishly excited to have access to this stuff to try and figure out what it is that was making the deer tick. And then as I got to know Bill, you know, awesome dude, genius guy. And I love just the analytical way that he's gone about, you know, getting this data, putting it in a machine to figure out and like create the AI that goes around like this neural network of figuring out why deer are moving and what correlatory patterns there are specific to your area.
Yeah.
Because what makes a deer move in my neighborhood is not what's making a deer move in Lee Lakoski's property.
Right.
Right.
I remember when he and I were chatting, you know, the one thing that he made mention of that, you know, that I thought helped kind of crystallize that point that they aren't, yes, they are all the same species, right? But they don't react to the same things to the same degree in every section of the whitetail range, so to speak. And the really great example that he used was that I hope I don't get the inverse right, but like even if the inverse, if it's the other way, it still applies. It's just, you know, it's an anecdote. Deer, it's just saying the north, right? A lot of times you'll hear people say like, hey, whenever you get like some precip or whatever, you know, it's gonna like deer are gonna move, right? And I think it was like somewhat marginally true, you know, in the north, depending on like the severity of like the precipitation or whatever. But there really wasn't a big difference when you got to the south, if I'm remembering correctly, like with precip versus not. And if you think about it, it stands to logic that like the humidity down there is significant. And them moving or not moving, whether it's raining or not, is not really going to be driven by whether or not it's raining, because we all know that, you know, water moisture helps deer smell better, right? Same with the bloodhound. They always want to track in like the dew if they're trying to blood track a deer, right? Because they want that little bit of moisture to help the dog smell. Same thing for a deer. And so that precip isn't really as important in the South because they're constantly getting like a dose of that moisture through just the humidity of the air. And so as opposed to tracking moisture there, I think you look at more humidity range, and you start to correlate some deer movement to humidity range versus precipitation per se. And I just thought that was really interesting, like to kind of draw the differences between like how they react to precip here. You would never think about humidity necessarily in Pennsylvania or D.C. or whatever. You would think more, oh man, I got a really light rain coming in tomorrow morning. Like, and it's, you know, October 28th. Like I'm in the woods, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to get just a little bit of rain. Like that's perfect, you know, but there it would be, I'm getting a little bit of rain. It doesn't mean anything. It's no different than yesterday, you know, unless you're getting a significant amount, you know. And I just thought that was interesting. And that's the type of stuff he's able to kind of help decipher. You know, I think it dispels a lot of old wives' tales around hunting, You know what I mean? To a degree. So where it's like you can kind of start to parse out like the reality from what, has been passed around camp for 50 years,
Oh, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then put stakes in the ground around things that have merit to them, and starts to add some structure to it as to how, why, and when. You know what I mean? Because that's the important thing. It's like if we know something happens, that's great, but like the important thing that he does is narrows it down to like, well, this is when. Like this is when you want to act on that piece of data, right? And that's the part that I think is really exciting.
Yeah, and it's so cool how it's like, I think we've been conditioned as hunters to want to know, like, at what time tomorrow are deer going to move, right? And you want it to be like, okay, 3:30 tomorrow afternoon is when you want to be in the woods. But in reality, it's like, well, based on the last 10 days of weather, like, the next 3 days are going to be really poor for hunting because the deer are just going to be bedded down, not up on their feet as much. Or it's like the next 3 days are going to be absolute gangbusters. You need to be in the woods whenever you can in the next 3 days, right? Because that's what the data shows. But there's no bullshitting data,
yes,
right? Like,
correct.
Like numbers and statistics and like actual factual evidence does not lie. And the amount of evidence that he has compiled is like, it was like 18. Yeah. It was like 18
mountains
years or like whatever. It's like, you're not going to capture that stuff. And it's specific to your local area. And to your point, I was blown away, and also not, because I'm like, thank goodness, like this makes way more sense than everything I've read my entire life, where like some guy on his farm in Iowa, what he's writing in this book like doesn't pertain to the deer that I'm hunting in the mid-Atlantic region, or the deer that you're hunting or whatever. I mean, like deer are they're the same species, but they're different in these little pockets. And so there were times where like I'd be driving around, I'd see a lot of deer, and I'd like pull up the Spartan Forage Tech, and I'd look at it, and I'm like, okay, it's accurate. I'm like, I can trust this more. And then it happened again and again, and then I started like planning my week out. So we were talking earlier about how I kind of balance my like work-life balance. So I try to communicate as much as possible with my wife, which she would tell you I do a terrible job at anyways. She's probably accurate. I'm like the biggest scatterbrain when it comes to responsibilities and stuff. But, I'll on Sunday, I'll be like, okay, well, here are the days I'd like to hunt. I want to hunt like Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, whatever. And so when I was planning out my schedule, I started looking at the Spartan Forge stuff, and I'd be looking at the weather, and where I would normally pick a Tuesday, the Spartan Forge Tech would be like, okay, hunt Thursday, Friday, and be like, okay, well, like, what do I have to lose? Right. And so I'll try it. And I mean, gosh, I'll be damned if it wasn't right. I mean, 75, 80% of the time. I mean, it was just, I was seeing more deer, and then to the point where I started trusting it, and then going to those locations, and it was spot on, man. So I think that has made a huge difference. And I think that, coming very soon, hint, hint, wink, wink, there will be something that's even more groundbreaking.
I've caught a sneak peek in talking to him the past couple weeks, and it's going to be super cool for everyone out there listening. Like, you're going to want to keep your eyes peeled for when this thing comes about. I had a similar experience as you, where we were talking, I guess it was late, like November-ish. Maybe it was like end of October where we first kind of started talking, and I was going on my hunt, and we were like, let's connect when I get back, or whatever the case was. And I was using, what was commercially available at that moment, just as like a kind of checking things out, you know what I mean? Just kind of, seeing how things worked and just playing around with it. And when he and I spoke, like whatever the next time it was, just for conversation's sake, I was looking at that and was I had just got back from my trips, and I was trying to plan. I actually think it might have been when I screwed the pooch on that deer, but I was looking to see, like, all right, when are my second rut dates coming in? You know what I mean? I was like, I want to know from my area what my second rut date is, essentially, because I'm just curious and I want to try to kill one of these deer, right? And I looked at whatever the secondary rut date was, and I had a cell camera in an area, and it went quiet, right? And it was in like near a bedding area, primary scrape near a bedding area, and I'll be damned if like it didn't crank back up like 2 days before the date that he had, that before the date that Spartan Forge kind of told me that would be the secondary rut date, which means that doe was starting to prime, which means she was probably 2 days out. And then sure enough, 2 days later, buck's on camera. You know what I mean? It was just, I had that epiphany moment where I was like, okay, because I know, he and I talked about this too. It's like, I've played around and checked out free versions of other app before, like it went like the freemium version before you had to pay, from some folks that made one that live in Iowa and stuff like that. And like, the shit just never worked because it was anecdotal evidence. You know what I mean? It was like what their experience were, and they're great hunters and they know their shit about hunting and they know their farms and take nothing away from their ability to kill big deer and stuff like that. But it was anecdotal. It's the things that they've seen and learned, and they have a mountain of experience, but it's hard to translate mountain of personal experience into applicable, intel for someone to take to use anywhere else. Right. It just doesn't.
Exactly. And what Bill's done is, instead of taking like observational data that these people that have made another app put out there, he's taken like actual
longitudinal data for a ton of years across the entire whitetail range from a multitude of data points. Like, and that's the thing. It's like, it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to talk to the research biologist. No, it was university research biologist. It was also insurance company, like, car, deer interaction data. Like, it's all this stuff as an aggregate, and it's longitudinal. So it's like, years worth of time that you're looking at this, to where it's like, when you start to see trends in that much data, you'll have some outliers here and there, but man, the bulk of the data is going to react in a certain way, like over and over and over again, when you have that much of it,
Yeah. It's just, I think that's just so cool. And I think it's really kind of like the next evolution of hunting. And I'm excited to see kind of where this goes over our next, 5 to 10 years. Cause it really helps the guy that isn't me. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, I can hunt enough that I'm going to stumble into deer. Right.
Yeah.
But, for the guy that lives to hunt and can only hunt, 1 day a week, if they're lucky, or can only hunt on Saturday. I mean, when I first got
out when to take your out of state vacation, like your rut time, like look at the dates and know when you're going to have the best opportunity. Like, historically, if you're going to go to hunt the rut, you're banking on unknown movement of a deer through an area of which you plan to be, right? Like, they're going to move. You don't know which one it's going to be. And so if you're doing that, you can better take the chance of saying, like, all right, if I'm going to take a week or 4 days or whatever it is, this 4-day window is when they're going to be moving in daylight most often, historically speaking, for this area, right? It's like you now gave yourself a better chance to have a great 4 days where you might have just threw a dart at a dartboard, picked some dates and went.
And at the end of the day, like, what you're doing is you need to stack as many odds in your favor as possible. Agreed. Right?
Yep.
So, like, even if you're Andy May, you don't want to be there.
That guy doesn't need any help.
Yeah. Well, I want to see Andy go hunt somewhere during lockdown instead of during the rut. But it's like,
exactly.
It's easier to, to increase your odds when the deer are zombie moding around all day, as opposed to, laying in their kingdom with a bunch of ladies laying around like Jabba the Hutt. Right. I mean, so it's good to have the evidence, and it's good to have the numbers. And that was a really cool little piece of gear that I started using last year and was really, really pumped with.
Nice. Well, man, we've been on here for almost 2 hours, brother. I should probably let you get going so you can get back to your husbandry duties. I don't want to be the reason why you turn up in the missing section on a milk carton
Trust
somewhere.
me, it will not be because of you. It's not you, it's me.
Right. But before I let you get going, man, if you wouldn't mind, let folks know where they can find out more about what you've got going on. Where they can watch any of the videos that you have coming out and just follow along with your hunting antics.
Yeah, absolutely. I put a bunch of content out on YouTube under Hunt Urban, so check that out. You can follow me on Instagram under Urban Bowman, and feel free to check out the Hang and Hunt podcast as well with my buddy Billy, where we tend to go off the rails more than we stay on them.
I know. I wanted to get to that, but we just dove straight into gear, and like 2 hours later. So I think what's appropriate is I think we need to have another session in the very near future and touch on that.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have to get Billy back from the beach. I was talking to him earlier. He's been out drinking and fishing all day, so hopefully he makes it back in one piece.
There'll be some stories then, is my guess.
There's never a dull moment with Billy around, so I'm sure there will be a couple episodes worth of stories that he can share, and probably some more that he can't share.
He can't,
so
right?
We'll see.
Well, on that note, brother, I'll let you get going. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.